Play them. I think that's the best thing to do, is just play them so that you can hear. They're not very long.
No.
Prior's pretty unhinged. It gets even worse at the closings.
Probably
But we
grab some
figured,
pillows to punch, pencils to break.
yeah,
You know.
something, because it's bizarre. We do have the court's live stream off screen from you guys, but waiting, because if they do come back on, we will just jump right to that,
Yeah.
because their live stream is still live, which means that they are still deliberating.
hmm
And the question really is, are they just going to finish this up tonight
If
so
they
they can go home?
don't, they will deliberate tomorrow. They're not going to make them sit in a hotel for the whole weekend. They'll go right back into
No,
deliberations first thing in the
right?
morning. Yeah.
They will. Yeah. So let's listen to the openings first. So the prosecution's opening was done by Rob Wood, and so let's hear that.
Roman. When we first met during the jury selection process, we spoke with you about what could happen if we got to this phase of the trial. And we spoke with you about some of your thoughts and feelings about if we got to this phase. And we're here. And in that earlier discussion, we talked with you about what happens if a defendant is convicted of first-degree murder or conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And we talked with you about some of your feelings and your thoughts on that. The discussion we had involved the jury questionnaires that you filled out. And those questionnaires in our conversations dealt with acknowledging that murder in and of itself is not sufficient for the death penalty. That there has to be something else beyond a finding of guilt if you are to impose the death penalty. And the thing that has to be proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt, and beyond that finding of guilt, conspiracy to commit murder, are these aggravating circumstances or aggravating factors the judge just mentioned. And we have alleged in this case, in a document that was filed a long time ago, there are multiple aggravating factors that we are going to ask you to find. And the judge read those to you. I'll go back over them in just a moment. In considering those factors, however, we don't have to start all over again. Yesterday, the court read you an instruction that says you may consider and you shall consider all of the evidence presented so far. And so you have to consider everything that you considered in coming to your verdict on the charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. We will not be presenting additional evidence to you in this hearing. However, you will hear from multiple victims in this case. Again, you are entitled to consider everything that has been proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt so far. And the judge read these, but I'm going to read them one more time. These are the aggravators that we are going to ask you to find exist beyond a reasonable doubt. The murder of Tylee Ryan was committed for remuneration. The murder of J.J. Vallow was committed for remuneration. The murder of Tammy Daybell was committed for remuneration. The murder of Tylee Ryan was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. The murder of J.J. Vallow was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. The murder of Tammy Daybell was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. That by these murders or circumstances surrounding their commission, that this defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. That the defendant, by his conduct, whether such conduct was before, during, or after the commission of the murders at hand, has exhibited a propensity to commit murder which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. Again, we're going to ask you to make these findings based on the evidence that's already been presented in this case and anything you hear today. And so going forward, as the judge told you, the trial will work like this. If you decide that the state has proven one or more of those aggravators beyond a reasonable doubt, this case then goes back to you. And it is your decision whether one or more of these aggravators has been proven. And if it has, then you must decide if under these circumstances, imposition of the death penalty would be just or unjust. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Wood. And so what he's describing there is what Idaho statute says about how a defendant qualifies for the death penalty. Of course, they have to be convicted of first-degree murder or first-degree felon or first-degree conspiracy to commit murder.
Yeah.
Chad's convicted of 3 counts of both first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to get the death penalty. They also have to find that these murders were for remuneration, which means money.
Mm-hmm.
Did he do these for money?
Yeah.
Were they particularly heinous crimes in the nature of the murder?
Yeah.
Also, murder for hire qualifies for this. So they have to meet the criteria. If not, they can give him life without parole. So that's what they're trying to decide. That's what they're doing right now, is deliberating about, does Chad's crimes qualify for the death penalty? These jurors have known from jury selection that if they were on this jury, they would get to this point if he was found guilty. They've known all along. They were questioned very significantly in voir dire about their beliefs on the death penalty.
Yeah.
And, so that's kind of where we're at. That's what Wood is explaining to them and explaining to him why, what they need to look at. And he's basically saying the evidence from the trial stands, and they can use that information from the trial. They don't have to just use what's presented here in the penalty phase, because very little is presented in the penalty phase because of what Chad decided today. So then Pryor gets an opportunity to speak for the defense. So the only defense that was given today were Pryor's opening and closing, nothing else. So let's listen to Pryor.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a saying that says you can define someone about who they are now and in the future by what they've done in the past. And only a unusual trajectory or an unusual or startling event can change that trajectory. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Chad Daybell. I want to talk to you a little bit about Sheila Daybell taking the stand and talking about this quiet, reserved, shy young man growing up in Springville, Utah. Springville's a town outside of Salt Lake City, about 50 miles south of Salt Lake City. Chad growing up there was a town of about 15,000 people.
Mr. Pryor, I really much apologize. We're barely picking you up on the mic. I don't know if we want to maybe swap mics or. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Apologies.
Skill with electronics is showing and has shown throughout this, I guess, correct? Yeah. Springville, Utah, small town, was at the time. I understand now it's 50,000 people. Chad growing up in this small town, quiet, shy, reserved, town of faith, town of religion, grew up in that. We heard Jason William talk about that. Tight-knit community. Maybe everybody knew each other. And then Chad goes on his mission. I don't know very much. You've gathered that. I don't know very much about the LDS faith. Goes off on a mission, comes back. This is not a mission where you gain worldly experience. It's not a mission where you gain insight into all of the unusual things or the challenges that people have in society. Things that many of us experience who maybe grow up in larger metropolitan areas or maybe even big cities or other parts of the country where you get an opportunity to experience other things. This is small town living. And he meets Tammy Douglas, and they get married. And they're married for 29 years. And by anybody's definition, anyone's definition, Tammy and Chad raised 5 wonderful children, 5 beautiful children, very deep in their faith, very deep in their commitment to family. And we can say maybe Tammy was the driving force in this. Tammy was the glue that created these wonderful children. But it doesn't just take one parent to do that. You don't raise 5 wonderful children, 5 amazing children with just one parent's input. It takes 2 parents to do that. It does take 2 parents to do that. And they did that, much like they shared in the Springville Publishing Company together. They did all of those things together and built this life. And Chad wrote these books. And again, I told you before, you don't have to agree with what he wrote about, but he wrote books about things that interest him. And Jason William, Steve Schultz, Emma. Jason talked about Chad, and Steve Schultz talked about Chad, deeply involved with the Boy Scouts, deeply involved with his church, a member, a secretary to, and I cannot remember the words, and I will hack him if I say that, but deeply involved with the integral part of his church and his belief. And as Jason William talked about it, he said, remember this when he said, December, Christmas time, something changed. Something changed. What changed in December? Chad got this trajectory that was changing his trajectory. You can judge someone by their past and predict how they're going to be in the future, unless there's an interjecting trajectory that maybe changes the plan. And that trajectory that bomb that came into his life was a woman who previously had been married 4 times. And that bomb brought chaos to Chad Daybell's life. And this worldly man, no, not a worldly man, no experience, the only girlfriend, the only woman, 29 years, from the mission to marriage to 5 kids. He doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with relationships, dealing with how to interact with people, maybe being manipulated. And we can argue this all day long. But when it comes to personal relationships, he wasn't a worldly man. And on the other hand, the trajectory that's coming through, The trajectory that's flying into this 29-year marriage is a woman who didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4 marriages. That's worldly experience. That's a lot of things. There's a lot of things going on there. And then it all changes. The amplification of these religious beliefs, these crazy thoughts, this crazy trail of things. And you've made your decision, and I'm not going to go back on that. But look at where he was. And in Jason Williams' own words, Christmas 2018, what changed? What caused this change? We know what caused the change. You've seen all the evidence. And when I went through the voir dire process with you, I used an expression, and some of you may remember this. I don't know if I used it with all of you. I said, everything that glitters is not gold. Lori Vallow glittered. She was not gold. She was the trajectory that changed the plan. You don't go back on 29 years of marriage with nothing as far as a speeding ticket. Raising 5 wonderful children, that takes 2 parents to do that. And then this trajectory comes in and chaos hits, and all of these things start cascading, and this thing becomes very complicated and difficult, easy. And this small town boy from Springville, Utah, who's residing on a farm with his wife and his family close by in a wonderful community of Rexburg, has this bomb dropped. Suddenly chaos ensues. We have to look back at that, because when you start talking about how do you predict the future, you go back looking at what the past was, and you examine what Chad Daybell's past was prior to the bomb being dropped, the Lori Vallow bomb being dropped on Chad Daybell's life, and suddenly all of this stuff changing. And you evaluate that and you look back and say, is this a person? If it wasn't for that trajectory coming in and changing the path, is this where we would be going? It's not where we'd be going. Path's changed. But you judge what's capable in the future by what you've seen him do with his family, his friends, and this small knit community of Springville, Utah, and raising these 5 absolutely wonderful children. Thank you.
When we
A pox, Prior, a pox on your wiener forever. Are
Please,
you
your asshole.
even kidding me? Yes.
I mean, what? The analogy was so fucked up. So we're supposed to skip over the murders and judge him based on who he was before they moved from Springville, that move that he forced because all of his prophecies were coming true, made Tammy go somewhere she didn't want to go, took her from her family,
Mm-hmm.
frankly made her miserable, and then murdered her.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
This
really
idea-
something.
Oh. This idea that this vixen woman could come in and make a man do all of these terrible things and it's her fault. Do you know who grew up being taught that? Us Mormon girls. That's
You
who.
betcha.
And anybody else that grew up in purity culture knows. Yeah, everybody's loving that statement you said.
That's one of my favorite curses, really.
Oh yeah, it is an excellent one. So, I mean, think about it. Anybody that grew up in a purity culture was taught, as we were taught as girls,
Mm-hmm.
that we had so much power over men.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies had so much power over men. We were not allowed to show any of our limbs, really.
My
And
goodness.
necks up to here, because
Hmm.
we could make men do terrible things just by them looking at us.
Just by existing, ladies.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm no Lori fan, but Chad went into this willingly, clearly willingly.
Yeah.
And to say that this was his first affair is bullshit, and we all know it.
Mm-hmm.
There have been other women come forward insinuating otherwise.
You
And
betcha.
he was looking. He says it in his dumb story.
Mm-hmm.
That you are the partner I've been looking for all my life.
Yeah.
What about the woman you were married to for 29 years that birthed 5 children for you?
Mm-hmm.
What about her?
5 wonderful, magical, fabulous children.
Oh my God.
I mean, first of all, they're all
That
grown
part.
adults.
What?
But second of all, are you motherfucking kidding me? Are
No.
you even kidding me with that?
2 of
That-
which perjured themselves on the stand. The other 3 of which didn't show up at court at all.
Yep.
They
Didn't
sure
speak
didn't
for
show
their
up for their
mama.
mother.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Nope. Unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew whatever he said I wasn't going to like, but I was not even prepared for that. Now, to Pryor's credit, he has been preparing for mitigation for who knows how much time, you know, that he's not even currently being paid for, but he's worked his ass off for mitigation. And then to have a bomb, I'm assuming dropped on him this morning from Chad that he doesn't want to do mitigation. I can only imagine how this and the clothes were the only chance he had to fight for his client's life. I'll give him that. I will. But Jesus H. Christ. That
You
couldn't
wait
have
for the
been
close,
worse.
because it gets worse.
Oh, it does get worse. Yeah.
It does get worse, which is
There
just
was a
kind of hard
comment.
to fathom.
I missed it way up here, and I'm so sorry. I'm not going to remember who said it. It was a man. He said, just a small town boy living in a lonely world.
Yeah.
We're
Right?
lucky he didn't burst into song and dance up there.
Aren't we?
When the bomb
Wow.
of Lori entered his life.
Yeah.
I did want to report that about 10, 12 minutes ago, some people were moved in the courtroom, moved to make room in the courtroom, moved to a certain area to close the courtroom, according to Caitlin Hart from EIN, but no news why. So the stream is still up. There is no news yet, so we don't know anything yet, but
we'll just keep on.
We do know there was a little bit of activity there, so that could mean something and maybe not.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And Nicole, right? The part about
Mhm.
it takes 2 parents to raise amazing kids.
You would say that, John. You would.
You
Yep.
would. I don't know if John has kids or not, but if he does, do you think he raised them? I bet not.
I'll bet Chad was the laziest, most ridiculous parent ever. And just threw out orders here and there because everyone had to listen to him as the patriarch of the home. But I'll bet you Tammy did 99% of everything.
Yeah.
Including earn their income, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, he didn't have to admit guilt in mitigation. That's not what mitigation is. He needed to have people come forward to speak for him.
Yeah.
And you know, say he was a good guy. And honestly, maybe they just didn't have anybody who would.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised that Emma and Garth didn't, you know. But I mean, no one got the chance because
I'm
they just
guessing he
shut
had
that
at
down.
least one professional on the line, though. Well,
I
I
would
figured
imagine
Garth
so.
wasn't going to be there, considering we had a listener that saw Garth digging around in the fire pit last night,
Oh,
or in the
that's
pet
right.
cemetery last night. It's a 5-hour drive to Boise, you know, so
Yeah.
I didn't really think we were going to see him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so strange. When the judge questioned Chad about not putting on a mitigation case, and he said, "Do you feel you're thinking clearly today?"
Are you unwell?
Yeah. Yeah, this means no Dr. Wellner. There is no more to be presented other than what happened today.
We're just
So
going to have to
the-
watch for Dr. Wellner in another case.
Yes. The prosecution didn't present anything other than the victim impact statements, the people who gave those, because why?
Mhm.
He's not even fighting it.
I had
And
one thought.
What's that?
I had one thought. Well, I've had a lot of thoughts, but one that might make any kind of sense at all. But one thought about, what if some of the kids were supposed to come and speak on his behalf? And what if they have watched this trial and finally realized how duped they have been, and at the last minute said, we're not coming? And maybe they didn't have the balls to come up there and speak on behalf of their mom. Or maybe it was just too late. But maybe they just decided they weren't going to speak on behalf of their dad.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just wonder if some lights
Yeah.
have actually started flipping on and they finally started going, what the hell are we doing?
I think it's very possible because something changed.
Something changed. And if
Right.
his
Tell
kids
it, why
said
did
they
he
weren't
fight?
coming, yeah, why
Mhm.
didn't he fight? And if his
Yeah.
kids at the last minute said, you know what, go fuck yourself, we're not coming, maybe that was enough for him to go, you know what, I'm done, not doing it.
I guess I think everyone is so flummoxed by this.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
difficult to understand. Why did he take this all the way to trial to then not even try to fight the death penalty? He could have
Right.
just pled guilty without the death penalty and it would have been over.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly something changed.
Yeah.
That's my impression. And a lot of people have said also that his goal was to be exonerated for Tammy.
Yeah. I believe that's true. I believe
And
that
I
at my
think that
core.
when you look at the case that they
Mhm.
presented, that's what his defense attorney fought the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was trying to keep his kids on his team.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he's lost that, he doesn't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe he does want the death penalty. I don't know. The thing is, it's not like it's fast. It isn't.
Yeah.
In Idaho, do you want to talk to us about that, Katie? And then we'll talk about some other stuff, but about the death penalty appeals and all that stuff.
I'm not prepared to talk about that. I thought you were.
I thought you told me you were. Oh,
I was just-
okay.
I have some things about death row to share, but
about death row. Share that with us.
okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, you're fine. So Idaho has 8 residents currently on death row. We have Azad Abdullah. He entered death row in November 2004, convicted of first-degree murder for the arson death of his wife in Ada County. We have Thomas Creech, who you guys are familiar with, who, because we've talked about him a lot, he received his sentence in January 1983 for beating an inmate to death in Ada County in the prison. We have Timothy Dunlap, who has been on death row since April 1992. He was convicted of first-degree murder for killing a woman during a bank robbery in Caribou County, for remuneration.
Yeah.
We have James Hairston. He's been on death row since November 1996, convicted of first-degree murder for 2 shooting deaths in Bannock County. We have Eric Hall, who has been on death row since October 2004, convicted of 2 first-degree murders, convictions for raping and killing 2 women in Ada County in 2000 and 2003. We have Gerald Pizzuto, of course, who's been on death row since May 1986. Gerald is dying currently. He's on hospice. He was convicted of first-degree murder for beating to death 2 people in Idaho County. We have Jonathan David Renfro, who has been on death row since November 2017, convicted of first-degree murder for the shooting death of a police officer in Kootenai County. And then we have our lone female, Robin Lee Rowe, who has been on death row since December 1993. She's convicted of a first-degree murder and the arson deaths of her husband, son, and daughter in Ada County. Tell me those crimes Chad's crimes eclipse these
They do.
in some ways. Thank you,
Maybe
Fawn.
not Robin Lee Rowe, but the others, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not Robin, but yeah. I mean, Chad checks the boxes, man. But I wanted to
does.
show you. Give me just a second to get my screen pulled up here. I thought it might be interesting to give you a little tour. Of the execution chamber. Are you guys up for it? Let's see. I'm going to have to pull this one. Actually, can you pull this one off the stage?
What do you mean?
Sorry, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. I need you to pull the court is in recess page down.
It is pulled down.
Just you got to just exit it completely.
Oh, okay.
So that I can add a new
Oh,
page.
I see what you're saying. Sorry,
See what I
guys.
mean?
I think we're both glitching just a bit.
I'm a little drunk, I'll be honest.
I am too.
This
just
drink
a
I
little.
made was more than I thought.
Okay.
Thank you for
Done.
that. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I didn't explain that very well at all.
I'm like, I don't know what we're talking. Okay, yeah, got it.
Okay. Alrighty. So, and this is from the Idaho Department of Corrections website. So this is the chamber itself looking south here, the first photo here on the left, and then the chamber looking southeast. This is the exterior or the entrance. This is if you were to get the lethal injection. This is the cell of F block, which is where these procedures are done. The isolation cell bed. Isolation cell table and window. Isolation cells are where people on death row go. So here's the sink, toilet, TV, bed. Another isolation cell picture. Here's the table with podium. Check out the podium. It's right next to the table. Isn't that wild?
Wow.
Here's the actual table that prisoners are strapped down to.
Ugh.
Over here on the right, here's the view from the witness area, because if Chad were ever actually executed, victims' families and the press and potentially others, if they were able to get a reason to be there, could view that. And here's more. As you can see, the witness chamber isn't very big, but this is where it's at, the witness area chamber, the witness seating. But that's what it looks like if you were to be present for an execution in Idaho. And that's a current comment because, as you know, they have now re-legalized the firing squad in Idaho as well. And because of that, it is possible that Chad could be executed via firing squad. That would, of course, be down the road. No, Carissa or Teresa or Carissa, Teresa, they have not yet, and maybe they won't. But we're staying in front of it. So here's the firing squad deal. Yes, last year they wrote up and passed a bill in our Congress to reinstate the firing squad. There were some problems with it because they wrote it literally without a single bit of input from IDOC. Nothing from the Department of Corrections. They were as surprised as anybody to see that bill in there. And it's thought that was written pretty much for Koberger. But we don't have a facility to do any kind of firing squads, and the facility itself is around a $4 to $5 million prospect. So before anybody were to be executed via firing squad, they would have to build that facility and pay for it. So
And
we
train
suspect,
staff.
yeah, and train staff and be ready. I mean, they could be easily 10 years away from that, easily, which is fine because there is a lengthy appeal process if you are somebody who's on death row. And so 10 years is probably pretty fair, depending on how far, how hard he chose to fight.
What's firing squad? That would be him being killed by gunshot rather than lethal injection.
Essentially, with firing squad, they line up multiple shooters, and most of them have blanks in their guns, and A couple of them don't. And so some bullets would actually fire, most of them would not, so that nobody actually would know who fired the kill shot.
Right.
Because, the problem with the death penalty is we're asking people to kill people.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like with lethal injection, different people put different parts of the cocktail in the IV for the same reason.
Yeah.
It's
So
very
no one
third world.
actually
Yeah.
knows who. It's bizarre.
Mhm.
And I don't know that it's likely that it'll ever actually happen.
Mhm. Yeah, no, we have no idea. But as you heard when I read out the people that are already on death row, some of them have been there since the 80s. Because Idaho has been very, very slow because they've had such a hard time getting the drugs, and they're still having a hard time getting the drugs. Though it seems
And the
like they have
state
a
really
fresh set
doesn't
right
like to
now.
execute people anyway.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, and
Yeah.
and Idaho has never executed a woman.
No,
If Lori had the death penalty, she would have never been executed.
it's why we didn't care at all if Lori got the death penalty, because we knew Lori's never getting the death penalty, at least not in Idaho. And I don't think her crimes even qualify for it in Arizona. It's just not going to happen.
No.
Yep.
No.
So,
oh,
oh no, I was going to say, so I thought
See?
that might be an interesting peek, yeah, into what the facilities look like and what that would look like.
very interesting. I don't think the conditions are really different than normal prisons. It's just a wing where they house everybody that's on death row.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big goals, and this is really strange, but it is true, that their goal is to keep them alive until their execution.
Mm-hmm.
So they have their own cell. They watch their health very closely.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing. Let's keep them alive till we can kill them. I don't really understand it, but that is a pretty common thing.
What does Mormon doctrine say about suicide? Yeah, it's a big hard pass. Suicide is a terrible sin in Mormon doctrine, and in fact is very frequently kept secret. I think that's typical of other religions too, but yeah, in the Mormon doctrine, that's a very scary prospect for families. And I have been to Mormon funerals where there was a suicide when some incredibly cruel things were said about the person who died to their families, very fear-based. I hope that's getting better. I don't know, but oof, that's a tough one, a really tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in college, I took a sociology course at Idaho State University, and my professor had done a huge suicide study in the state of Idaho, and he talked about how often suicides are just deemed accidents. Single car accidents, cleaning my gun accidents, that kind of thing. When in reality, if you go back and actually talk to the family and look at somebody's history, they were suicide.
Yeah.
Yep.
Happy days. I don't think we're Mormon bashing at all.
No, I don't. If that's a concern for you, I don't know why you're here really, but we're not Mormon bashing. That is just reality.
Yeah.
We grew up with it. If you didn't, I don't know what to say.
To be fair, we've had family and friends commit suicide and have attended many funerals. So
Sure have.
I apologize if you think that's what's happening here, but it's definitely not our intention. No.
Mm-mm.
Our great grandma was very elderly and very ill and was, clearly dying in the hospital. And they wanted her to go on hospice. They just wanted her to go on hospice and make her more comfortable. And she was so scared that meant she was committing suicide. And it finally took our dad paying her a visit and sitting down with her and explaining to her that it wasn't and it was okay, and giving her a blessing and, giving her basically permission to go on hospice because she was so scared that even that action of not fighting anymore meant that she was committing suicide. She was terrified. Terrified
I
that that was the
remember she was
case.
telling us that she just wanted to go.
Yeah.
She just wanted to go and be with her parents. And then asking us, is that bad? Am I committing suicide?
Yeah.
She was in her 80s and in rough shape. I mean, it was was really
Oh,
sad.
she was a type 2 diabetic almost her entire life and mostly
Mhm.
unmanaged because, well, we discovered in her 70s she didn't know what a carb was, but
No, she
she
did
was a
not.
hell of a lady. But,
She was.
right. But that's how frightened she was. That's old school, I know, but that's how frightened she was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of you are asking about blood atonement. Somebody said they read in an article that the firing squad is because of blood atonement. Okay, first of all, that is not true. That is not
No.
what happened at all in the legislature. Blood atonement is something that used to exist in the Mormon Church. It was a belief that if you violated your covenants, then you should take your own life, or someone else should take your life. Those things were acted out in the Mormon Temple. They've been lessened and kind of changed now, but that is an old Mormon belief that is not related to this at all. But
Yeah.
people like to connect stuff like that, but it isn't true.
Yeah.
Um,
Not in
just
this
so you know.
instance. Yeah.
This bill, the person that wrote this bill said they wrote this bill for Brian Koberger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're not talking about Grandma Betty. We're talking about Lucille.
We're talking about your grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was under the impression that the spilling of blood is necessary for blood atonement in Mormon. Yes, like death is spilling of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like cut your throat or disembowel yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That
used
is
to
what was
be,
said. Used to
yeah,
be.
that used to be a thing. It was symbolic, though it wasn't really done. It was symbolic, but yeah.
And it's believed that it did actually happen a few times in the very early Mormon Church, but
Yeah.
not really fully connected in this situation.
No.
So I do have a little bit of information about what happens immediately if Chad does get the death penalty.
Okay.
If the jury comes back and says, yes, we're sentencing him to death, then the first thing that happens is that immediately triggers a review from the Idaho Supreme Court of the death penalty sentence. So this is separate from appeals that are filed by the defendant. This is an automatic thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
During that appeal, the death penalty sentence is temporarily suspended. So they go through that appeals process. If it is upheld by the Supreme Court, then they reinstate the death penalty. But there are still more voluntary appeals that a person can make, and that is why a lot of times it is many years, sometimes decades, before someone actually receives a death warrant, which is an order from the governor that it's time to take this person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So even if Chad chose not to appeal at all, he would still get the first appeal because everyone gets that appeal. They just go through and make sure everything was done properly in the penalty phase. It is not an appeal of the conviction, it is an appeal of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So they go through and just make sure everything was done correctly by the jury, by the courts, all that stuff before they come back and say, okay, yes, this was done correctly, this sentence stands, or it doesn't. I don't think it's real common for them to overturn the death penalty in that appeal. I think it's quite common that they don't. But it is something that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there are a lot of different kinds of appeals and ways to get appeals after that, if that death penalty stands.
Mm-hmm.
And someone can also opt for to not appeal anything.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, though, that projects like the Innocence Project get involved and actually do approach defendants not defendants, but prisoners that they think maybe have a shot for one reason or another. They review their cases, and sometimes it's at the request of the defendant, and sometimes it isn't. But they would have to find something really egregious in Chad's conviction, and I don't really think that's going to happen. This case, the judge has been extremely careful
Mm-hmm.
to protect this case.
Yeah. Pamela said, so because he didn't choose to have mitigation, does that mean they have a chance to appeal? No, it doesn't give him more of a chance than anybody else because he chose it. And the judge
Yeah.
made him say in open court, not his attorney, made him say that he was waiving it to be sure they preserved that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll still have his appeals, but not because he didn't do mitigation. That was his choice.
Yeah. It's the same as his choice to put up a defense. It's
Mhm.
just real weird to put up a defense and then not put up a defense in the penalty phase 2.
Mhm.
Everybody was stunned today.
Mhm.
I suspect that it might be because Chad thinks he's better than this and that it doesn't matter because he's a god, don't you know? Because
Yeah.
he's an exalted being. It's very possible that that's where he's at, because that's where Lori's at in her head. She doesn't see any of this as really being real.
Mhm. And
So,
that at some point, someday, somebody's going to step in and save her.
yeah.
Yeah. So the Innocent Project that stepped forward to help Scott Peterson, and me too, I was so mad. I'm like, what the hell? That's not the Innocent Project, as it turns out. It's some group that has formed in Los Angeles that's calling themselves the LA Innocence Project. So, like, the big National Innocence Project was like, that's not us. That is
Yeah.
not us.
No.
Yeah.
Any possibility that his parents didn't want the mitigation report to be public, like it would embarrass his parents? I mean, I don't think Chad cares about embarrassing anyone. His own mother came and testified for the prosecution.
Yeah.
So I don't think that he would withhold anything to not embarrass other people. Would he withhold something to not embarrass himself, however? Yes.
Mhm.
The
And
dude's a
it does,
narcissist.
you have to wonder if he was starting to read through those mitigation reports and realize just how personal that was going to get into his life and got dicey. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first appeal is automatic. The first appeal everybody gets, which essentially is that his attorney and then the appellate attorney that's assigned to him will look all the way through the transcripts of the case and decide if there was anything that was improper or that could potentially be an issue. They will send that over to the appellate court, which is a panel, I believe, of 3 judges who will go through those things and decide, is there anything here or isn't there?
Yeah.
But what people don't understand about appeal is that people seem to think, I'm gathering this especially after the Trump ruling and things I've read, is that people seem to think that an appeal either means you're exonerated or you get a new trial. That is unlikely. That's the rarest of events.
What is it? Something like 3%?
Yeah. There may be
16 in
another,
appeal.
yeah, there could be another remedy that could affect your sentence or things like that. But to just have a reversible, sorry, we fucked up, you can go home, that just doesn't happen. And especially in a case like Chad's where there was so much evidence, it just doesn't happen. Noreen wants to know, why do you need a facility to shoot someone? Good question. It's just all
Well,
because of safety.
and the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
our right to be free of cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, it's state-sanctioned murder, and so it is very heavily regulated.
Yeah. If the firing squad ever gets reenacted in Idaho, like physically, literally, I'm going to be very, very surprised. I doubt it ever does.
Yeah.
That was just some
Yeah.
yippee cowboys putting on a show in the legislature.
It was just stupid.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about how the legal system actually works.
Thank you. Jess said appeals are for losers and they very rarely change the original outcome. But I think it's a good question, Sue, because he's going to get that initial appeal that's just, that everyone gets. But then is he going to keep fighting, or is at that point he's just not going to do anymore? I really wonder if you're right about that he's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. Lori's appeal is currently, they keep having to extend the time because her appeal started here in Idaho and then now she's in Arizona to be tried, and so it's just on hold.
Yeah.
Until those cases are done.
Yep. Well, and her appeal has actually been delayed many times because
Mhm.
actually because of the clerk, because the court clerk has filed for, I'm going to say 4 extensions now to get the full transcript together and get it to the new appellate attorney. But
Yeah,
again, nobody's in a very big hurry. So,
no. I mean, she has consecutive life sentences to serve.
yeah. Yep. And yes, typically death row prisoners live in a lot more isolation and a lot more supervision than other
Hmm.
prisoners. And one of you made a comment
They're
that I thought
generally
was,
considered more dangerous
yeah,
because of the
yeah.
things they've done.
One of you guys made a comment. I'm sorry, I don't know who now, but said that they had watched a YouTube of a guy who's an ex-con talking about how he thought Chad would do in prison. And I thought that was a really interesting comment. They said that he thought Chad would do quite well in prison because he is a
Mm-hmm.
rule follower and because
Mm-hmm.
he is pretty quiet and would probably end up with a little cushy jail job because he's just not going to be up in there causing trouble. I think that's probably
Right.
true. I hate to admit that my first thought was that he'd end up their librarian. Then I thought, gross, get
Ooh.
that out of your mouth. But he probably would, some kind of little clerical thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
But
would
not
say
if he's
that's
on
really
death
likely.
row. Not if he's on death row, though.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Why
not
the
at
hell
all.
didn't he just take a plea? Chad, why the hell didn't you take a plea?
Right.
For God's sake.
We've been asking this for years.
I'm still back on
Uh,
the same. I still think this was simply to try to prove he didn't kill Tammy. Period.
mhm. I think you're right.
Yeah.
So after the openings, we then moved into victim impact statements.
Uh-huh.
And this was as brutal as you can imagine it to be, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It was a rough day. There
Yeah.
were also there were a lot of jury instructions. I guess I should do that first. Um, kind of the same stuff that Wood said. You know, there were multiple aggravating factors in this case. This is what the judge said, and he lists them. He says Tylee and JJ's murders were committed for remuneration. Or Chad convinced someone else to commit the murder for remuneration, which is the same penalty. Tammy's murder was committed for remuneration, uh, or Chad got someone else to do it for him. Tylee's murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel.
Mm-hmm.
JJ's murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. Tammy Daybell's murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. Chad exhibited utter disregard for human life, and Chad's conduct exhibits a propensity to commit murder, which would cause a potential danger to society. So he reads these instructions to the jury that these are the things that they need to consider. These are the things that are being presented as far as um, what they have to consider, going forward for the death penalty or not. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, this has to be a unanimous decision.
Yeah.
If it's an 11-1, then it's life
Not
in prison.
happening. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we got the victim impact statements. And these were really powerful. A lot of people showed up for
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, which I thought was
Yeah.
really awesome.
I was so happy to see that. Yeah.
And the first person to speak is Ron Douglas, and he's Tammy's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he talked about losing Tammy. He talked about Tammy moving away first to come to Rexburg and how difficult that was for their family because they had lived a block away and were
Mm-hmm.
close. And then, he talked about how his wife died. His wife died right after Lori's conviction last year.
Yep.
And he said, one of the things he said is, I find it comforting to know that Tammy is resting peacefully in Utah,
Yep.
buried alone. Buried alone.
Yep.
Remember how we've talked about how strange Tammy's
Mm-hmm.
burial was and how strange her headstone is? Well, her dad would most definitely have noticed all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we
And he
heard
sure
from
did.
Kay.
And we got a tiny
Mm.
peek of Tammy's dad. After that, they moved the camera, so
Mhm.
you didn't see him walk up, walk down, nothing.
Yeah.
But Tammy's little dad, my God, this
He's in
tiny
his
little frail
80s.
man. Yeah, the bailiff really had
Yeah.
to walk with him and help him up onto the stand, and yeah.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Mhm.
Okay, so then we get Kay Woodcock on the stand, and her victim impact statement was very similar to the one that she gave at the end of Lori's trial, talking about how they first got JJ when he was born, and he was born addicted, and it was a bad situation, and they took him home from the hospital with guardianship of him, and how they later let Lori and Charles adopt him because they felt like it was the
Yeah.
right thing. He was going into a home with other children
Mhm.
and with younger
And younger
parents.
parents, yeah.
Yeah. And she talked about how they never lost their connection with him, and visited him regularly and saw him. And even though, he didn't live with them anymore, that he and Kay and Larry had a very close relationship with JJ, as we know.
Mhm.
We've heard her stories before, and it was, um, it's heartbreaking.
Mhm.
And Chad is just staring there with his stupid resting toad face the whole
Yep.
time. He doesn't have any
Nothing,
reaction
man.
to any of this.
Yep.
No.
He was more animated yesterday than he was today. He was absolutely flat.
He
Nothing.
really was. It was creepy as hell.
Yep.
So then we get Matthew Douglas, who is Tammy Daybell's brother. And, he talked about what a nightmare that this has been, and that it's been a nightmare that never ends. Because first they lose Tammy, and
Mhm.
then they find out that Tammy's has been exhumed, and they find out that there are missing children. And of course, the Douglases do not know anything about these kids
No,
or who
they
they
didn't even know
are.
they existed.
No. And when they hear, and then they're just heartbroken about this
Yeah.
situation, of course.
Yeah.
Matthew called Tammy the emotional heart and glue of our siblings group.
Mhm.
He also talked about their mom and what an impact it was for their mom, and how difficult it was for her to lose Tammy.
Mhm.
He also said that he has kids close to Tylee and JJ's ages,
Mhm.
and that this has been heartbreaking for them.
Mhm. Yep.
So then we get Annie Cushing, who is Tylee's aunt,
Mhm.
Joe Ryan's sister.
Yep.
She talked about when she learned that Joe had gotten married and converted to the LDS church and had a baby on the way,
Mhm.
and how excited he was
Mhm.
to have this child, and called her daddy's little girl.
Mhm. And how
Um,
surprised they were, because she said he was the perpetual bachelor in their family that
yeah,
never seemed to you know, settle down, and then suddenly he's joined a church and he's getting married and there's a baby on the way, and hallelujah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She said when Tylee was a toddler, um, talked about her being a toddler and how fun and cute she was, and then as she got older, that she was clever and smart and funny and sarcastic, and she could sing,
Mhm.
and that she would walk around the house singing.
Mhm.
Um, then she talked about after Joe Ryan's death,
Mhm.
that she came to visit, and that she could see that Tylee was depressed.
Yeah.
And so she tried to help her and tried to be more in her life. Joe and Annie were not close, and they grew up in a very painful, abusive situation, and
Mhm.
their family was pretty fractured. She's talked about
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah.
And, so this was, she loses her brother. And of course, we know Joe Ryan was dead for a few days before anyone found him.
Mhm.
And Lori didn't even bother to tell Annie for several weeks after that, when Lori was the only one who knew.
Mhm.
So it was a really painful situation.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the things that she said about Tylee I loved. She said Tylee was all about facts. If it wasn't accurate, it wasn't meaningful to her.
Mhm.
She also said she doesn't suffer fools. And
I
that's
love
why
that
she
she
didn't
said
like
that.
Chad Daybell.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yep. Yep. And that
Um,
she was a pretty sassy teenager with her mom, which
hmm.
we had heard before and expected. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't have been at that age, and especially with the bullshit going on?
Mhm.
Annie had planned to fly Tylee out to New York City for her 18th birthday.
Mhm.
She was having trouble staying connected to them because of Lori's extremist beliefs, and she had felt like she had to separate herself from Lori
Mhm.
because of all the crazy stuff that
Mhm.
was going on
Yep.
with Lori. And I
Mhm.
think that, you know, Annie's idea was, you know, Tyler's going to be 18 soon. I can have a
Mhm.
relationship with her when she's an adult, and I don't have to be involved with Lori because Lori was such a mess.
Yep.
Um,
She told a cute
she,
story about JJ
yes.
running through the kitchen and kind of slamming into the side of her and, just not seeing her and being a kid his age, and kind of knocking her off course a little bit. And then he kind of grabbed her and hugged her on his way past and said that it was a drive-by hugging.
Yeah, it's cute. She
Yeah.
tried to connect with JJ, and
Hmm.
that was kind of tough because JJ had autism and he didn't
Hmm.
really connect. So she told
Yeah.
another story about how he was just sort of yelling random things, and they were sitting in the living room watching TV. So Annie just started yelling out stuff that was happening on the TV to like participate with his yelling because she
Uh-huh.
was just trying to connect with him.
Yeah.
But Annie didn't have that much opportunity really to
Yeah.
connect with them.
No, she
And
didn't.
but she did talk about how much Tylee loved JJ and
Yeah.
how tight knit those two were.
Hmm.
Um, then for some reason that I cannot explain because we really never heard why, Pryor asked for a sidebar in
Yeah.
the midst of this,
Hmm.
which I don't know what that was for. They didn't really say. They just
No.
came back and kept going.
I will say,
Um,
though, I appreciate the sidebar versus objecting during victim impact statements like John Thomas
right.
did in Lori's, because that
Hmm.
was in the poorest of poor tastes.
It absolutely was. It was disgusting. The way that John Thomas did. And I
Mhm.
wondered if Pryor would do the same shit, and he didn't, which I guess we can give something to his credit, right?
Yeah, he never tried
Um,
that. I was glad.
no. So then we hear from Kelsey Douglas. She's Tammy's sister-in-law. She talked about how profound and devastating her murder was.
Hmm.
Kelsey gave birth to twins who are now 4.5 years old, literally a couple of weeks before Tammy died. And she had talked about how disappointed she is that her kids don't get to know their Aunt Tammy,
Hmm.
and you know how much they've missed out and how much death that they have experienced in their young lives.
Hmm.
So apparently, oh, somebody says, Hidden says the jury's having dinner. Okay,
Okay.
they're still working. I mean, I would imagine, you guys, they want to get done because then they can go home.
Yep.
They're probably going to work until they're they're done. Um, you know, Kelsey talked about how sad she is for when Tammy's mother died, Kelsey's mother-in-law, because their family relationships had become so strained with Tammy's kids, and that her mother-in-law, Tammy's mom, was so hurt and just disappointed and in a lot of pain around
Hmm.
the fact that her grandchildren were just had just stopped having any
Hmm.
contact.
Yep.
And I think about that. I think about how close our family is
Hmm.
and how like, you
Oh,
know, we have helped raise each other's kids.
yeah.
And for that to just stop would be
Oh,
horrifying.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah, horrifying. So let's see. So they take a break. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. First we hear from Ben Douglas. Ben is
Hmm.
Kelsey's husband
Yep.
and is Tammy's brother. And he talked again about how devastating it was. His twins were born 9 days before Tammy's death.
Yeah.
And that they were, doing that excited but not getting any sleep kind of brand new parents thing
Mm-hmm.
when he finds out his sister's dead.
Yep.
So then the state asks for a sidebar, and
Mm-hmm.
Boyce gives them a 15-minute bathroom break,
Mm-hmm.
which turned into like a 45-minute bathroom break. I don't know what was going on that break, but it was
Everyone was back in
one.
the courtroom but the judge for
Yeah.
a good 15 minutes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We think he
Yeah.
was just laying on the couch in chambers, just
Right?
trying to recover.
Trying to get it together
Yeah.
after everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really hard and sad for the family that none of the kids attended grandma's services. Many of them talked about that, JSI. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then Boyce comes back, and we hear from Colby Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And Colby struggled. Man, he cried a lot.
Oh,
This was
boy.
rough for him. Colby just
He
breaks
couldn't
my
even get
heart.
started. It took him a minute. It was so
Yeah.
hard.
I mean, he lost his entire family for
Yep.
this situation.
Yep.
He said, it's very hard for me to put into words what it means to have lost my entire family. Yeah.
Yep.
Talked about how he,
Oh, it was Kelsey that was speaking when the mic was turned off. Thank you, Lee.
oh, yes, yeah. They came back from that break, and they didn't turn the mics back on.
Mm-hmm.
I know, everyone's ready to freak out.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't last very long. We got it back. And then, he just talked about losing everything, not getting to watch his siblings grow up. He said that their murders were like a nuclear bomb dropping in his life.
Yep.
He said, I stand here motherless, fatherless, sisterless, and brotherless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we get Samantha Gwilliam, who we love Samantha. She has been such a wonderful voice for Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
She and Tammy were best friends.
Yeah.
She's Tammy's sister. She said that, that Tammy is dead, and that she would stand for her and protect her and love her, because the people who were supposed to didn't. And she meant,
Yeah.
The family. Every one of Tammy's siblings talked about how devastated they are that they have lost Tammy's children in their lives. They did imply that it's not all of them, that they have contact with some and not others. We can imagine who those others are.
Mm-hmm.
Samantha said that she smelled a rat when she found out about Chad's marriage to Lori.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about how terrible it was when they found out that her body had been exhumed, and how upsetting that was because they didn't know why. And then she talked about when she found out, when she saw that Tylee and JJ's bodies were found on the same property where her sister died. She said she retched and screamed and cried.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about, that how much Tammy loved being a mom and a grandma,
Mm-hmm.
and that how they had raised their children together, and how devastating it is for Samantha to not have contact with the kids that she helped raise.
Yeah.
She also addressed the fact that she would stand up for her sister and to defend her. And
Yes.
she talked about how people in court had called her lazy and fat.
Yep.
And that she was pissed.
Mm-hmm.
She did say that she is the same age now as Tammy was when Tammy died.
She said to the jury, "Look at me. Look at me. I'm the same age Tammy was when she died." Yeah.
Yeah, she said, what did she say? It's not wrong to be a middle-aged woman.
Yeah. It's not a crime to be a middle-aged woman working on your health. Yeah.
That she was really powerful. And
Yeah, and she did say she is not dark. Yeah.
yes, she did say, I am not a dark person or a zombie. For me and my family to be portrayed this way is unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then we get Michael Douglas. Michael is Tammy's older brother. He's the oldest in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was rough. This situation has had a huge impact on him.
Yeah.
It has screwed up his
Ooh.
physical health and his mental health.
Yeah.
And he knew right after the funeral that something was off about this situation. And then he said he remembers when he heard about missing children and that he was thinking, oh, please no, Chad told us they were empty nesters.
Yep.
When the children were found, he said he broke into more pieces than I can count. And that he started crying hysterically at work and had to be like rushed into an office to separate him from where he was working from other people, I think.
Yeah.
And he's really, really struggling. Like his health has taken a dive. He's had difficulty working. He's having mental health issues. He's on medication and in counseling. And, you know, he said, I've had my peace stolen and I have to fight every day to be patient and kind with others and myself.
He said there's an angry part of him that he hopes will go away someday.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
He
really
said he's
sad.
Tammy's big brother and that he feels like he failed to protect her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course he didn't. He couldn't have anticipated this. And Tammy was an adult, you know, living her life. And of course he did nothing wrong. But, yeah.
I can get why he feels that way, though. Definitely.
Michael was probably the hardest to hear. He was heartbreaking. They all were. I was so damn proud of Sam, though. She was so full of fire. Yeah.
She was.
And I love that she fought back. Every single one of them invited Chad's kids to return, to talk this out, to return to their family, to come back and help them to heal and to rebuild. Every single one of them.
They did. Michael is Tammy's older brother, the oldest in the family. Tammy was the oldest sister, and Michael the oldest brother. So then they take a break again, and they come back, and Boyce kind of goes back over the jury first they have to talk without the jury, because they have to finish up the last of the jury instructions. They go over those. Lindsay Blake doesn't have any issues with them. John Pryor tries to bring up the change in reasonable doubt. What does it have to do now? He's already convicted, but you know, he's got to have something to say. So they kind of argued that for a minute, and the judge overruled that again. And they went back and they kind of went over the jury instructions again.
Yeah.
With the jury. Also at that time, they made it known that Chad would not be speaking because he still had the opportunity to speak. Remember when Lori spoke at her sentencing? Kind of like that.
And worry not. When we're done talking about what happened today, we're going to listen to Lori's since Chad didn't give his. I have it pulled up and ready.
Do you? Okay, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, coward at this point. It's just a coward.
Total coward. Yeah.
So they did the whole jury instructions again. And then the prosecution and the defense were given the opportunity to give basically a closing statement. So I'm going to bring those up. I have them. Blake's is really good. Pryor's is absolutely unhinged.
Again,
Pryor,
get your pillows and your pencils.
It was like he was having a stroke. When we get to Pryor's, I want you to really listen, because there are times when Pryor doesn't even complete entire words. I'm not even sure what the hell he was saying, but
well, I'm guessing Pryor wasn't ready for a closing
he
today.
May not have been.
Blake may not have been either. I'll bet she was. She was very polished, but I don't think.
I mean, she had a multimedia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's always, up for stuff, but
yeah.
Let's see. But yeah, we'll get to Pryor here in a minute, but here's Blake's first in just a second. Sorry. It's just getting it to load. And if you're wondering, the state's live stream is still live. So yeah, watching that. But here's Blake's closing.
Ladies and gentlemen, labeling someone dark, lowering their death percentage, marking them for death. What is the appropriate measure of justice? On August 12th of 2019, Lori switched Tylee's Social Security payments to go into her sole, meaning Lori's sole, BBVA account. The first payment was deposited on August 28th of 2019. Less than 2 weeks later, Tylee was dead. On September 18th of 2019, Lori received the first payments associated with the Social Security that she and JJ were receiving because of Charles' death. Just 5 days later, JJ Vallow was dead. Lori found out that she was not going to get the $1 million life insurance policy on Charles around July 11th of 2019, and she messaged Chad to let him know that. But remember what she told Chad, I'll still get the $4,000 in Social Security. On September 8th of 2019, Tammy's life insurance was increased. Chad signed off on that application. Tammy was dead just a little over a month later, while the attempted shooting was almost 1 month to the day that she upped her life insurance. Remember, the multiple messages relaying the plan is for Chad and Lori to be together, alone on a beach, unencumbered by celestial obstacles. Unencumbered by earthly obstacles. Chad formed the plan. That plan included manipulating those around him to ensure that he could end up on a tropical island with Lori Vallow, who eventually became Lori Vallow Daybell. She was a woman that he deemed to have perfect proportions and to be a goddess. But in order to fund a new lifestyle, living on a tropical island and spending all your time with your new goddess lover, how do you fund that lifestyle? And how do you remove the obstacles to getting there? First, Chad taught others that he could determine whether someone was dark and or possessed. Second, he taught others that if someone was possessed or too dark, then the body had to be destroyed or die to free the person. Third, he started teaching those around him that he could determine death percentages. Essentially, this meant that Chad could mark someone for death and determine when it was their time to go. He exhibited that power to those around him. He exhibited that power of his self-proclaimed visions to those who believed him and followed him. When we talk about if the murders were committed for remuneration or financial gain, the defendant received $430,000 in life insurance money after Tammy's death. Money that was used to fund his life in Hawaii with Lori. Lori continued to receive the Social Security payments from the kids whose bodies were hidden on Chad's property so that they could continue to receive those Social Security payments. The murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, manifesting exceptional depravity. What else could these murders be? Tylee, unknown cause of death, because of her body being burned so severely, there were charred bones, remains in a melted green bucket. JJ, cause of death, plastic bag, asphyxiation by a plastic bag over his head. Not only that, but he had tape over his mouth, a plastic bag over his head, tape around that bag, his arms duct taped from elbow to elbow, and then placed in a black garbage bag. He also had scratches on his neck, and you saw the last known video of JJ. Those scratches don't appear to be there. Tammy, cause of death by asphyxiation manner homicide. Tammy killed in her own home, a place where she should have felt safe. Her life extinguished. By the murder, the defendant exhibited utter disregard for human life. Tylee was only 16 years old. JJ only 7 years old. Tammy, a 49-year-old mother of 5. The mother of the defendant's kids. It didn't matter the age of the victim or who relied on them and loved them. If they were in the way of Chad and his plan, and or if there was money to be gained for Lori and Chad, those individuals were marked for death. The defendant, by prior conduct or conduct in the murder at hand, has exhibited a potential to commit murder, which will probably constitute a continuing threat to society. Again, 3 victims killed, all at different times. Again, the defendant determining who was possessed, determining the death percentages, and once again, the defendant determining when it was their time to go. And Alex Cox believing and trusting Chad 100%. Alex said shortly before his death, "I am worried I am going to be their fall guy." Another statement he made, "Either I am a man of God or I am not." Lori, when asked about believing Chad, "If Chad is a Satan, he sure is a good one." Chad told more people than just Lori and Alex about people being dark. You heard of other people that were labeled as dark by Chad, including 12-year-old kids. The only difference is it was only those that stood in his way of his plan or who there was going to be financial gain from that ended up dead. Ladies and gentlemen, you will decide what justice is. At every stage of the development of the plan that resulted in the death of Tylee and her body being burnt, with parts still missing, the death of JJ wrapped in plastic bags and duct tape and discarded in Chad's yard, the death of Tammy Daybell, who had her ability to breathe, to live, suppressed. Tylee was last seen on September 8th of 2019. JJ was last seen on September 22nd of 2019. Then Tammy was discovered deceased in her home, October 19th, 2019.
My name is Tammy Daybell.
At any point between these deaths, the defendant could have stopped, but he didn't. He continued to rate people as dark and zombies. He continued to determine death percentages, and he continued to move forward with his plan to ensure that he was on a beach with Lori Vallow, unencumbered by earthly relatives, earthly obstacles. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you to consider what is just in this case in rendering your decision. Thank you.
Wow.
Brilliant, per
Very
always.
powerful.
One of you asked why I thought Lindsay wouldn't expect a closing. I just think she might not have expected it today.
Yeah.
I
They were expecting this to last several days.
really think Pryor wasn't expecting it today. He didn't seem ready. And frankly, I wondered if that's why there were some breaks and sidebars, because
Yeah, they were
they
just
had
trying
some
to catch
readying
up.
to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen posted that the jury finished dinner about 15 minutes ago and is back in deliberation.
Mhm.
So they're still working at it. There was a question about, uh, Lindsay quoted Lori saying, "If Chad is a Satan, he's a good one."
Mhm.
Some people thought she said saint. What she said was Satan,
Mhm.
not Satan. Satan. It is
Mhm.
her East Idaho accent that made that hard to understand.
Mhm.
But she's saying Satan. That is what Lori said when she maybe had some questions
Yep.
about whether this was really going to work or not.
Mhm.
So after that, then we get this unhinged mess from Pryor.
The final
Really pay
belligerent
attention.
turd circus from Pryor.
Right. He actually does something I've heard Trump do quite a bit, which is not finish a word. He
Yes.
starts a word and doesn't finish it. There are
Mhm.
several incidents of it in here, so let's watch that.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to go back to the indictment in this case. And the indictment accused Chad Daybell of espousing religious beliefs. And if you go back and look at the indictment, it talks one of the overt acts was espousing the religious beliefs to justify a killing. One of the other overt acts is that they claim that Chad did a south-southwest wind direction. And if you look back at the indictment, you'll see that all of the other overt acts, every one of them, dealt with, as far as JJ and Tylee are concerned, dealt with actions by Lori Vallow. When we talk about remuneration, let's go back and do a little history lesson. Let's talk about Joseph Ryan. Before Chad ever knew Lori Vallow, the plan was set for Joseph Ryan and Lori to collect the insurance, the life insurance proceeds. The plan was already in place before Chad was ever even in the picture. And then we get the plan with Charles Vallow. And then I know I spoke to you at the time of my closing about Chad Daybell and the insurance for, that Lori was claiming to get on Chad. If you've made your decision, but if you look at the indictment, the allegations with Chad Daybell are not about remuneration or money. The allegations with Chad Daybell were allegedly religious beliefs and espousing religious beliefs. And the time we spent on the screen was about religious beliefs that he claimed to have had and that he espoused. This had nothing to do with money. Nothing to do with money. The insurance on Tammy Daybell, the $300,000 was set in 2002. And the state cannot allege that in 2002, Chad Daybell had some plan to collect insurance. When you look at the documents of the upping of the insurance, Tammy Daybell upped her insurance because it was relatively cheap. But the reason Chad Daybell signed that document and signed off is because he was also getting $20,000 insurance. And the only reason he had to sign was because if you listen to what the real estate or the insurance folks said, is if he's getting insurance as well on himself, he has to sign. This has nothing to do with money. You found that there was murders. And I want you to read the statute and the directions and what the judge has presented to you as what you have to find in terms of atrocious conduct. And the judge specifically said there that if you find that there was a murder, that's not enough. You have to go beyond bounds of human decency. And if you look back at this case, if you recall, Chad Daybell was never present for the actual murder of Tylee Ryan. Chad Daybell was never present. There were many other people present for the murder of J.J. Vallow. And whether you believe or not that Chad Daybell suffocated Tammy Daybell, and it's as tragic as that is, that doesn't reach the heinous, atrocious conduct that's defined by what the judge is instructing you. And at this point, folks, I'm going to ask you to find that there was no conduct that rose to the level that the state is trying to present at this point.
Sorry, that cut off a little earlier than I thought I was going to. Did you hear him say tragedy instead of tragic? Did you hear him say remuneration instead of, or no, remuneration instead of remuneration? Did you hear him say Chad did a South by Southwest? It was the Google search, but he didn't say all of it. Like, He's, I'm sure, exhausted, as they all are. But holy shit, man. It's a good thing we're at the end of this. He's done.
He's coming unzipped. Yep. But that whole, I mean, like, it was bad, but it wasn't like bad. I mean,
And all that shit that Chad was
dude,
found to not be there for these murders. No, he wasn't.
that's not true at all.
There's no
Yeah.
evidence at all that he wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
They can't prove that he was anywhere else, or he would have proved that. Yeah, he is tired, but I think mentally, emotionally, he is not in a good place.
No, he's done.
Yeah. He got
He's
names
done.
mixed up. He got a lot mixed up. And I was like, oh shit, man. We've all worried about his health through this because he doesn't look well.
No.
And that was like, holy crap. He's
Yeah.
really struggling to speak.
Yep. Well, and again, I just believe he wasn't prepared to do a closing
No.
today and
Yeah.
threw that together. Thank
Yeah.
you to my 2 cents and someone else. Let me get back to it. Teresa, thank you so
Teresa,
much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and him not saying murder, I know, except for that one time when he definitely did say it.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of blathering. It didn't make
Mhm.
any sense at all. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about money. Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Chad
this
got that
wasn't about
insurance
money?
policy. Yeah. Chad got that insurance policy in 2002. He couldn't have possibly known in 2002 what? Of course he didn't know in 2002, but he knew in 2019 that he had that money coming if something were to happen to Tammy. I mean, what the hell? It's the dumbest argument I've ever heard.
It was just a no argument. He had to get up and say something.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if he did suffocate Tammy, I mean, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man?
That doesn't rise to the level of bad. Holy moly.
Murdering your wife of 29 years? For money?
Yeah.
And your hot new girlfriend that isn't hot? Yeah. That's bad.
Yep. So at that point, the jury broke to deliberate, and that was at exactly 2 p.m.
Yeah. So
But
we're
the
at
fact
5
that they've had
hours and
dinner and
36
they're back
minutes or
at it
something.
tells me that they think they're going to finish tonight.
Yeah.
Everyone's still there. The families are still hanging around the courthouse. Maybe not at the courthouse, but people are pretty much hanging around there waiting. Yep.
I think it was about money and other things, GSI.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I do think he wanted to flit off into the sunset with Lori and have that money to live on. It's just, again, it just went a whole lot faster than they thought it would.
Yeah, well, with Chad presenting nothing. So yeah, they are still at it. That's what's going on right now, is they're still in deliberation.
Yep. One thing you guys many of you have pointed out and wondered about is why nobody addressed Chad. Oh, they wanted to. They weren't allowed to. They were only allowed to address the jury.
Yep.
I wondered what that was, Sue. Okay, fine, I'll delete it.
That's funny. Yeah, they're not allowed to address him directly. Every state has their own rules around things like that, and there is a set of rules that these statements, they have to be turned in ahead of time, and they have to be approved. And if you notice, the judge was reading something, so was Pryor. They were actually reading the written versions of these statements.
Yep.
Because the jury, they're still in the presence of the jury, so people can't get up and accuse him of things that are not part of this case.
Yep.
Or yell out evidence that isn't evidence, or whatever. Like there are limits to what they're allowed to do.
Yep. I wish they would have just excused the jury and just given people in the gallery just 5 minutes to yell at him.
Right.
They deserve that. They all deserve to yell at him for just a minute. Samantha did do a pretty damn good job of getting her message to Chad. Agree.
She did.
Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that is why there were objections in Lori's trial.
No, there weren't. No, because
they
there
were
wasn't
trying
a jury.
to say those things.
Well,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. There wasn't a jury, but they were, trying to say Kay said something, I
Mhm.
remember one of the objections was against Kate saying something
Mhm.
that they told her she can't say.
Yeah. Yep. But we were surprised last night to realize that some of you guys never saw Lori's closing statement. And since Chad didn't grace us with any of his nonsense, we thought maybe you'd want to watch Lori's instead.
Oh, hold on to your butts, guys.
Oh, can you pull that off the
Yes, I
screen again?
stop sharing. Okay, got you. Now I
Sorry.
know what you mean.
Well, now I could ask in a little more clear way. Okay. So, and honestly, get ready for the shock of a lifetime here.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to start by quoting John from the New Testament in the Bible. In John chapter 8, verse 7, Jesus says, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." Then in verse 15, Jesus says, "Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. And yet if I judge, my judgment is true." Jesus knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen. I have a different perspective in life because in 2002, when I was pregnant with Tylee, I died in the hospital while in labor with her. They tried to stop my labor. They put me on the table and they put something in my IV, and I felt my spirit falling to the floor. I was standing near my pregnant body, watching the doctors try to revive me, which took them a few minutes. In that time, my sister Stacy was standing to my left. I turned to hug her and was surprised that her spirit was as tangible as a physical body, because I knew I was in spirit and she was in spirit. She said she needed to show me some things, and we went to heaven. I later returned to my body. Because of this experience, I have access to heaven and the spirit world. Since then, I have had many communications from people now living in heaven, including my children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, my sisters, Stacy and Lolly, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents. I have had many communications with Jesus Christ, the Savior of this world, and our heavenly parents. I've had many angelic visitors have come and communicated with me and even manifested themselves to me. Because of these communications, I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world. Because of my communications with my friend Tammy Daybell, I know that she is also very happy and extremely busy. I have always mourned the loss of my loved ones, and I have lost many in this mortal world. However, I know them more than most people. I know where they are now and what they're doing. I know how wonderful heaven is, and I'm homesick for it every single day. I know we all lived in heaven before we were born on earth, and we were all adult spirits in the heavenly realm. We chose to come to earth as mortals. Heaven is more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. I do not fear death, but I look forward to it. I did not want to return to my body when I was out of it. Even though my son Colby, who I adored more than anything, was only 6 years old at the time, and I was about to give birth to this new baby girl that I wanted so badly. a young mother. And you would think I wouldn't want to leave my children. But as I stood in heaven, I did not want to go back. I thought they would be fine without me because I was peaceful and I was happy and I was home. But then I was told by Jesus that I needed to go back and complete things that I had covenanted or promised to do before I was born. This caused me a lot of distress because I knew heaven was my real home and I only wanted to be there. I was free from pain, emotional and physical. But then I was shown how I would help my children and others in the future. So ultimately, I did agree to go back to my body. Kylie has visited me. She is happy and very busy. Kylie is free now from all the pains of her life. Kylie suffered horrible physical pain her whole life. I sat with Kylie in the hospital year after year after year while she screamed in pain when the morphine wasn't even enough to take away the pain of her pancreatitis. I sat there while she cried and I held back her hair while she threw up. And I am the only person on this earth who knows how much Kylie suffered in her life. She had pain every single day. She never felt good. Her body did not work right. And I don't know if that was from complications from me dying while she was being born or something else, but she had a very difficult life. She was sexually abused by her own biological father since she was 3 years old, and she was forced by family court to go visit him for 10 years against her will. I fought for her in court. I protected her. I tried to protect her with my whole life. I tried to protect her. I worried about her every single day. Kylie had to get her GED because she couldn't go to school every day because she never felt good. She felt sick. Nobody knows this because Kylie, like myself, tries to put on a good front, tries to be a happy person, tries to have hope in life, tries to know that she's here for a purpose and that she has an eternal purpose to be on this earth. But I never stopped worrying about her. One of the times that Kylie came to me as a spirit after she died, she commanded me and she said to me, "Stop worrying, Mom. We are fine." She knows how I worry and how I miss her. The first time JJ visited me after he passed away, he put his arm around me and he said to me, "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I love you. And I know you loved me every minute of my life." JJ, Joshua Jackson, was an adult spirit. And he was very, very tall when he put his arm around me. He is busy. He is engaged. He has jobs that he does there. And he is happy where he is. His life was short, but JJ's life was meaningful. JJ was a wonderful person and touched the lives of everyone. And I adored him every minute of his life. My eternal friend, Tammy Daybell, has visited me on several occasions. She came to bring me peace and comfort. And I know that she is extremely busy helping her family, especially her children and grandchildren. And I have a great love for Tammy. My beautiful children, Kylie Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, rest safely this day in the arms of Jesus. My wonderful friend, Tammy Daybell, rests safely this day in the arms of Jesus. And I look forward to the day when we are all reunited and I too will rest with them in the arms of my Jesus.
Holy shit.
So yeah, that's what Lori said. If you'd like to try to imagine what Chad was going to say.
The jurors have retired for the night and will come back at 8:30 a.m.
Okay.
So here we go. Wow. My favorite part about that whole video is Judge Boyce's face at the very beginning when she starts out with that scripture. And for a moment, he forgets he's the judge and he looks stunned.
Mm-hmm.
And then he does a lot of blinking, like he cannot fucking believe this is happening right now.
Blinking.
Like you can tell that like somehow he's got to express this fucking ridiculous situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is just unbelievable. Every time I hear it again, I'm like, I still can't even. The way Lindsay Blake is literally turned in her chair, just staring at her, just aghast. Like,
Yes, like I
is this
cannot.
even happening?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Not only that, I'm quite sure that Summer said that she'd never heard that before. That
Yes,
NDE
she
story
did
before.
say that.
Yeah. Yep.
No.
It was Thomas.
Oh my God.
Thomas
The hope and
spoke.
love speech.
Yeah, Thomas's speech. Oh my God, it was terrible as well. Just terrible.
It was insane.
It made me think that Lori was seriously rubbing off on him. It was bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about how what we can make better out of this situation is to give Lori Vallow hope.
Mm-hmm.
That there is hope in this life for her.
Yep.
As in, Judge, please give her the opportunity for parole, is what that
Yep.
fucking meant.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable.
Yep. So here's what's going to happen tomorrow. We will open the stream and it'll stay open. We are going to be participating on our phones because we are going to Utah to our cousin's celebration of life. Our cousin that was missing last fall that was found here a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the stream will be up and open and we will still manage it, but we won't be home. And so if a verdict comes, we will still be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. to discuss. So
Yeah.
things will stay mostly the same tomorrow, except for that we won't come on directly after the verdict to discuss it. It'll be 6 p.m. when we come back.
Yep.
I don't know, Jane. I've been up in the air the whole time. And I'll tell you, you know how last night yesterday, I had my guilty on all counts postcard ready to send and all ready on all our socials. So all we had to say is push
Mhm.
go or do push go when they had the last bit.
Yeah.
When I sat down today to get my graphics done, I don't know. I wasn't sure. I made two. You can see them if you want. Because I don't know what's going to happen. I think this long pause gives me pause. So I made this one saying that he
They
has
only
been.
need one holdout.
Yep. I have this one saying that the jury did recommend a sentence of death, and then I have this one saying that they recommended life without the possibility of parole, because it'll be one of those. But yep, I made two this time because I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly hard decision for anybody to be a part of deciding
I don't
somebody
envy
else's
them
death.
at all.
I don't either.
When you see the death and destruction in this case, how does killing another person seem right? That's just my feeling around it.
I'm not usually a death penalty guy. I'm still really not. But in this case, I wouldn't be that surprised if the jury went death penalty. Partly just because of the state we're in, and partly just because of the, the crimes themselves. They are really heinous. And when we talk about what happened to Tylee, especially, God, yeah. Well, and JJ, my God, he was alive. I can't ever get over it. He was alive. Put in that tape in that bag. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the bottom line is Chad Daybell has been convicted on all counts. he's never getting out of prison.
Yep.
He will never be released. Regardless of what this jury comes back with, he's
Yep.
never getting out.
Yep. Yep. But it is an incredibly hard decision for the jury, and I can respect that as well. And whatever they decide, I will absolutely respect. The jury has given up for the night. They've headed back to the hotel, so they'll be back at 8:30 in the morning to get back at it. So long as the court opens a stream, which I'm assuming they will, we will open a stream, and we'll all just be on jury watch again tomorrow.
Yep. And we'll be with you by phone. We'll be on
Yep.
our phones.
Oh yeah.
It won't seem any different to you.
Yeah, we'll be very present. The only difference would be when, if a verdict comes back before we make it home, then we won't come back on immediately and discuss it. We'll just be back tomorrow night at 6 per normal for the follow-up.
Yep.
Yeah, she is. Sandy's like, yep, that's what's up.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen.
She concurs, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Whew.
Well, what do you say? Did we do it?
I think we did. Yeah.
I do too. I'm exhausted. I'll bet you guys are too. This has been a day.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready.
I just want to give one more shout out to the Douglas family. Oh, actually, I'm not done. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I did have one more thing to share. This is a picture that the Tammy Daybell Douglas Foundation posted today.
Oh.
There's the Douglas family. And of course, Tammy and Mom are gone. But this is the whole crew. Look at that sweet little dad.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to remind you about the Tammy Daybell Douglas Foundation. You guys heard about it again in court today. We've discussed it many times. But this is the foundation that her family formed to give books to kids because they knew that would be something that would be near and dear to Tammy's heart. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat room. But if you're not in the chat, it's just Tammy Daybell Douglas Foundation.com. Or no, I'm sorry. It's Tammy Daybell Foundation.com. Tammy Daybell Foundation.com. But you can, if you choose to, you could make a donation. After Lori's sentencing, we made a good donation in the name of True Crime Squad, and we will do that again this year.
Yeah, we definitely will.
But that's how you do it. They've posted a lot of things on Facebook the last few days about how much people caring and loving Tammy has meant to them and how much that has lifted them up. And I think that's something we can do is lift them up. So, and you can go follow them on Facebook and Twitter. They don't tweet very much, but you can follow them on, and they post on Facebook frequently, and it's great. Even if you aren't gonna or can't make a donation, that's totally fine. But go follow them and leave them a kind word. That means a lot. Oh, thank you, Terry. That means a lot. One thing that has lifted all of them up is how the world has fallen in love with Tylee and with JJ and with Tammy, and we have all acted like they mattered in a way that the people who killed them sure as hell didn't. And that's meant a lot for the people who love them. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All righty. Yeah, I thought so too, Phyllis. A lot of people, and we've talked about this before too and wondered a little bit, why did they keep Tammy Douglas Daybell in their foundation? Why didn't they drop that and just go back to Tammy Douglas and not have to have that last name of her murderer? And her brother talked about that today and said that that's because that was her name and it was her life and they didn't want to take that away from her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it is her own legacy. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And regardless of, where her kids seem to be now, those are her kids' name too. And that still means something to Tammy. Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to answer Phyllis's question really quick, and this was from earlier. Phyllis's brother talked about rededicating Tammy's grave.
Yes.
And a grave dedication it's just a special prayer that is said, and it's said by a priesthood holder, so it's said by a man. And after they exhumed Tammy and then returned her body, they went and rededicated the grave. It's something that Mormons do at funerals to dedicate this ground, for the rest of the person there, basically.
Yeah.
So they just redid it after it did happen originally at her funeral, but
Yeah. So just a rededication. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because they did say that Mom was particularly really, really disturbed by the fact that she was exhumed. Though I'm sure she was glad later, but that was
I'm sure.
very hard to hear for her.
But I can
Yeah.
see why they'd. I think anybody would do that. Go back and have a
Yeah.
little service with your family, or bring flowers or something.
Yeah.
Because no matter the reason, it's always disturbing to have to do
Absolutely. Yep.
that. We did it with our little brother, our baby brother, after our mom died.
hmm
She wanted to, and it wasn't for exhumation purposes, but she wanted his body moved to be. She wanted him buried above her, and it was hard.
It was a very emotional day. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And he'd been gone for more than 30 years.
More
at
than
that
30
time.
years. Yeah. And we had gotten the go ahead from the state, which the funeral home told us that would be really hard to do and they may not allow us to do it. And we're like, you don't know who you're dealing with, bro.
Yeah,
But
no.
they gave us permission within a few days, and the funeral home was shocked.
Mhm.
But then they were going to do the exhumation in the cemetery in Tetonia, Idaho, and then bring the baby to the other cemetery in Ryrie, Idaho, where our folks are buried. And initially they couldn't find him. And they tried to give up on us. They're like, oh, I mean, we just can't. It would take a backhoe. And that would be like
I was on the phone with
$800.
that idiot, and I was like, they're
Okay.
bringing the backhoe.
Yeah.
Are you serious? It's going to be really expensive. I said, I don't care.
Yeah.
This was our mother's dying wish. Get the fucking backhoe and find our brother.
We're like,
And
we
they did.
promised her. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No.
No.
And then
Yeah.
about an hour later, they called and said, okay,
Yep.
we got
We
him.
got it.
Yeah, and put him in a new little casket, a tiny little plastic box, and brought him and buried him at her head. Yep.
Yep.
And yeah, we did a little, blessing on the grave at that time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. All righty. Well, let's call it a night.
Mhm. We'll be back here with you in the morning.
All righty. Take care, guys. Get some rest.
Thanks for being here.